Okay, so welcome everybody to the Sophie Smiles Special Interest Group conversation. I'm Victor Newman from the Executive Business Centre at the University of Greenwich, and I'm currently running a developmental programme for academic staff on the topic of building industrial partner capability. One of the elements of this programme involves developing strategies to help academics develop mutually beneficial partnerships with business organisations. And obviously this is a change from the traditional closed approach that academics have to research. Now, I ran into Sophie back in 2010 when Sophie was running I&I, which she'll be talking about in a moment, a commercial FT 100 special interest group for innovation practitioners. Now, I started out as an after-dinner speaker and went on to introduce several innovation techniques, and I then got to lead some exciting practitioner knowledge capture exercises, and you may even see me in the little video wearing a pink shirt, almost out of view. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share a little piece of video lasting just a few minutes, and then I'm going to ask Sophie to share some of her experience with you. Right. I'm assuming it's up there, Sophie, is it?
Yes,
cool, let's go.
For people to work together and have no competitive and conflicting issues is fantastic.
We can't continue just to be what we've been before. The definition of insanity is to expect something different by doing the same thing. So collaboration programs like I&I allow me to listen to what others have done and connect those dots.
It's great to see other companies and what they're doing, and to making sure that we can benchmark ourselves against them and make sure that we're always on top of the innovation and change agenda.
I&I stands for improvement and innovation. Both are fundamental to success in today's business world.
So this is really part of understanding what do other companies doing, what are the challenges they're facing, how can we learn from that.
The sense of urgency to achieve higher performance is stronger than ever, and what I&I does is help organisations deliver better results faster. Our service has been designed to help our customers build capability and accelerate learning. We are a catalyst for knowledge sharing across industry sectors and between non-competing organisations.
For me, working for an oil company, to be interacting with banks and with insurance companies and with all sorts of other different types of industries, it really just takes the shackles off me and makes me think differently.
Through working with us, our customers are able to make better informed decisions, learn new approaches for successfully delivering results, and increase their understanding of what can be achieved.
So when I first heard about I&I, it was after I'd been to a number of conferences where we were getting the same old stuff regurgitated time and again. And what I wanted was a safe environment with other people doing roles similar to mine, where I could have a conversation about how to solve problems that we were all facing. And that's what I found in I&I. And we're able to move beyond developing that as a framework and into something we actually use.
We've exchanged information on what we've done and vice versa. Those lessons have been taken and incorporated in what we're doing on a day-to-day basis.
I&I identifies where relevant knowledge and experience exists outside of the organisation. We design and deliver 360 exchanges where focused peer groups of leaders share stories of their success and failure.
To catch the attention of an organisation of that size, everything had to be really big. So you had to be talking about millions of dollars in benefits.
I&I have been instrumental in getting us together with a whole lot of companies from different industries we wouldn't normally have a contact with. So having something that introduces you is a great asset.
We are facilitating the exchange of knowledge and ideas across different industries, and we focus our efforts on the objectives that each organisation has for learning.
We've got various connections that we've really created around thinking about different ways of working, thinking about structures, and also just some potential business opportunities that I hadn't seen in the past, and those all have been possible from this meeting.
There's a lot of good discussions, that you get perspective on things and perhaps find other ways of actually looking at the challenges that we have. So I think it's extremely valuable.
It's not just all about hearing the good news. It's about debating what did and didn't work as well.
We're coming up with new ideas, new ways of working, but also next steps to help them continue learning going forward. We've been successfully delivering collaboration events since 2003. We'd love to talk with you about how we can help your organisation deliver better results faster.
Lovely piece of video, Sophie. Well done. So I think that's going to be really useful because you say some really important things there, which we can go back to. So what I'm going to say now is Sophie has moved on since that period as a visual consultant and communication consultant. You can find her very well described on LinkedIn with lots of experience. But I particularly want the Executive Business Centre professionals to pay attention to three things. Firstly, how Sophie developed I&I to build a valuable commercial special interest group for professionals that identified and met their needs as professionals. Secondly, how her business model for I&I and her strategy changed. And finally, Sophie's advice, which is going to be very useful for all of us, to anyone who's considering setting up a similar practice-led commercial special interest group. Okay, I'm going to shut up now. Sophie, it's your turn.
Okay, thanks, Victor. Yeah, it's interesting seeing that video. It's been a while since that was shot. So yeah, thank you for inviting me to talk. And as it said right at the end of that video, whilst I&I was launched, I think in 2008, it actually began really in 2003. So the very beginnings of that business started as something called One Six Sigma. I launched a website, an online information portal, in 2003. And at the time, I was working as a researcher in a recruitment business, actually. And this management approach called Six Sigma was growing rapidly, and there was so much interest in it. I started to connect people and generate some content around what it was, and there was a virtual community which I developed, and the premise of that was a lot of people were getting trained, a lot of practitioners that were getting a lot of knowledge and information, but they hadn't yet had a huge amount of so that tacit experience of applying those tools and techniques. There was huge interest in sharing and exchanging around those sort of challenges around applying the tools, how to get projects going, and being as part of a network which had been born out of a recruitment organization. I set about gathering content, creating content, facilitating user group meetings. And the business model that was based on really was free content and free services for the practitioners, and sponsorship and advertising. I was selling that on the website, and quite a few training and consulting companies flocked to be able to advertise on that site because it was quite a rapidly growing network. And I was fortunate to be sort of really the first group doing that kind of work in Europe. There was another organization, website called Six Sigma in America. And the real value, I think, that the people that were using that that service or attending those meetings was that there was, unlike the conferences that were happening at that time, which had a focus on more like show and tell, and they were essentially sort of sales pitches for companies wanting to recruit trained and experienced Six Sigma professionals, really. And what the user group meetings that I was facilitating at the time were doing was, as the gentleman said in the video, it actually allowed people to confer and to exchange about what was not working so well. So in order to do that, I had to create the environment for people to trust and feel safe in doing that. Even though there was sponsorship from consulting and training organizations on the website, and I allowed some sort of flyers and information to be at the user group meetings, I did actually maintain a no sales sort of presence in the meetings themselves. And that did actually create a little bit of tension, but it meant that the value proposition was really strong for the practitioners. It meant that there was real honesty. It meant that people could really learn. And what happened over time, it became very popular. I was facilitating these user group meetings across Europe. And over time, what was happening, I was generally sort of reaching into more senior levels, so more change leaders and leaders of in business improvement programs, and the breadth of the methodologies was changing. So I noticed that companies were then incorporating things like Lean, Kaizen into the methodologies. The tools were branching out, and I recognized that actually, one, it felt a little bit too narrow, the name, and I was thinking of essentially just rebranding the website. But when I did some research and I really was talking to some of the most active organizations, I saw an opportunity to really serve them a little bit more deeply, really. What I did was I went to a number of these organizations, 10 founding members that launched the I&I project. We're all in that One Six Sigma community. And I went and sat with them and I asked them about what their challenges were, what their ambitions were for that year. And through these in-depth interviews, I understood, and I was sort of in the middle of that hub of the community. So I had some good knowledge of what programs and focuses those different organizations had. And I could see an opportunity to create sort of this more bespoke agenda really for them, how I could connect different companies to exchange. And once I'd done a round of those interviews, I then developed a value proposition and then I pitched it back to those organizations. They ranged in industries, for instance, Credit Suisse, Shell, Sun Chemical, the Royal Mail, TNT. They were some of the founding members. So I tried to get a good coverage of different industries, manufacturing and the sort of more transactional type service organizations. And the 10 founding members of that business paid between sort of 30K and 50K to have a number of people engage in a program of knowledge exchange. And it included some of those main community network meetings where they would all get together to tackle some larger topics, but then there would be subtopics which were focused on more detailed issues such as applying these methodologies to particular areas in the business, or challenges around change, or challenges around specific training. And I created an agenda for those organizations, but I also formed a steering committee. And I think that the value that they really saw, which is different from the One Six Sigma piece, was that they were driving that agenda. They were telling me what was most important to them. And because of the change and the shift that was happening in these different tools and methodologies, and the fact that these companies were really adapting, they weren't just sort of sheep dipping people into a particular training that had come out of GE now. They'd started to adapt their own training courses, and there was a lot more variation there. So we needed to create some kind of common language, bit of a framework to be able to compare apples with apples in a way. So I used a framework which was developed by someone called Chris Collison. he wrote a book called Learning to Fly with Jeff Purcell, and then went on to write another book called No More Consultants, which the I&I business was, there's a case study in that book as well you can read. And he had developed within BP this model for what he called bench sharing, and it was based on a matrix. So you had essentially a very simple kind of assessment tool, and those 10 founding members, we got together and we created this assessment tool. It had, I think, 10 capabilities, which ranged from things like leadership and executive ownership, employee engagement, performance focus, governance, things like this. And what were the real key capabilities of business improvement? And then established what good looked like. So we had a level from 1 to 5 in those categories. And those companies agreed roughly what it meant to be a level 5, a level 3, a 1, and filled in the gaps in between. What this gave them was a way to see where they were on, like, map a landscape, and then there was a really cool visualization of that. I think it's called the rivers diagram that, again, I'm not taking credit for that. That came from Chris Collison. But that was so valuable because they could see at a glance where they were and in comparison to other organizations. So could make a beeline to connect on particular topics. They had co-created it, so they felt very engaged in it. The visual representation was really helpful as well. And when new organizations that I would invite into the community network meetings, obviously I was always looking for bringing new companies in. It was now a membership subscription model. So the community network meetings were a way to invite new members, and they could do that self-assessment and see the opportunity to go and talk to those other members and create their own agenda. So the return on the investment was really measured at that point by things like how engaged had people been, how many events had they attended, how much they used the website and downloaded tools and information and that sort of thing. And what happened from, obviously, that was launched in 2008, and we'd gone into a recession, and it was getting increasingly challenging to renew some of those memberships, because I think in some organizations that was seen as a non-essential. So I had to really work hard to demonstrate the value of that engagement. It needed to be really tangible, and that was one of the reasons why I then shifted the business model again. Brand stayed the same, but as described in the video there, it was I&I Business Collaboration Services, and that became a much more bespoke service provision. So companies would pay a range. It could be from something like 10 grand up to 50 grand to have us research and deliver a bespoke exchange, which would bring in non-competing organizations to sit around a table and actually work on creating, like, creatively problem solving together. One of the largest ones I did was with AstraZeneca, which had about 200 people, and we flew in 10 different leaders from different organizations. They were particularly looking at R&D and the rapid change that was happening at that point, and some of the pressures that they were facing. Did a similar one around capability development and the future of training. Another one around the psychology of change, and these were delivered as a project, and the return on the investment of that was really set out from the outset. So I made sure that each project had a very clear scope, and we knew exactly what the tangible learning outcomes were. And the introduction of those external companies to that particular project became a really great introduction as well, because I was able to then go to the head of R&D, say at Ericsson, and say, I'm calling on behalf of the head of R&D at AstraZeneca. We'd like to, invite you to sit around the table. And they weren't charged for that opportunity, but it would introduce them to the network. So that worked really well, actually, from a business proposition. What else to say? I think to go to your question, Victor, about what would I advise, or some of the things that I've learned from that experience. One was, or if I can even share something that I look back on and say, I wish I'd have done it slightly differently, it would be getting the balance right between the face-to-face and the technology. What really worked from the very beginning was having the right environment, creating the right environment to get that trust and get the exchange really working. And I think what we tried to do with the I&I members side is we sunk a lot into developing technology that actually was available 5 years later, was available off the shelf. That's probably a timing thing, but I think there's an interesting change now. I think the opportunity to bring in AI to capture knowledge, to perhaps analyze some of the outputs from these kind of exchanges. I mean, we just didn't have that at that time. And I've always been fascinated about how to capture learning, how to capture the lessons, how to disseminate those lessons. And we did some great work, Victor, on doing some of those processes to expedite the process of understanding what the learning is and then to share it. I think there's probably even more opportunity to do that now. The purpose, it's being really clear on the purpose is obviously important. And I think some of the exchanges, I did a piece for the Welcome Trust, and actually we had a really interesting thing from the outset where actually they didn't need to have tangible outcomes to learning outcomes. They set out that actually this is a purely creative opportunity, and we're going to just explore something, and we're not going to set those kind of boundaries. I mean, that was great to do, as long as we're clear on it. And I think the other thing I'd say is about mapping the landscape and having a framework. That's been really important. And I think now there's ways that I've been exploring to do that visually as well, and to get people to see where they are, see they want to get to, map something so they can see something in context. We weren't really doing that in the network now, but that's something that I've developed since. So that's off the top of my head, Victor. How's that so far?
No, that's brilliant. I've even made some notes. No, but that's superb. I guess if I put myself in the shoes of academics who might want to consider actually going out and creating a kind of open community of practice, which a special interest group is, how essentially it's got to be based upon a lot of research, hasn't it, as to who to talk to, developing that value proposition, and how to get them into your space. And I guess there's no way of avoiding that hard work, is there?
Well, no, you're right. Although I would say that I had the advantage of setting this up, of having access to quite a big network, with the recruitment agency. So that did give me that sped that process up quite quickly. And I think even partnering, I partnered with conference organizations, perhaps a little bit, that was a little bit cheeky with the 1 6 Sigma site, because we did end up growing into being a competitor. But at the time we weren't a competitor, we were a media partner, and that gave me access to a lot of people. And again, I think there's an opportunity there to gather insight. I think I didn't do any really formal research, and I think, you know, whether it's through surveys or being able to gather content from conferences, what people are talking about, what the challenges are, is I think to bring people in, you need to also use their language, and you need to understand what their problems are, for sure. I don't think you can get away that. You can't get away with it, but there's probably ways to do it more quickly now with tech, probably.
Brilliant. Sophie, I want to say thank you very much for your precious time, and also it's been great to see you again, even if it's only on the computer. And we must get together in London sometime.
That'd be brilliant. Thank you. And yeah, and if you want to receive any more information or just follow up, no problem at all.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you. Bye bye.